I'm going to open it up to the audience because I think it's time you did some work and I can just relax. So, I mean, we've had two very interesting presentations about the challenge of making this attractive to politics, to consumers, to business. Questions, please. Otherwise, I'll carry on having to work. Let me see hands. Yes, gentleman in the front row there and the woman there, please.
Thank you very much. Fantastic presentations. There was an element of the last presentation about this cross-price elasticity thing, and that being the better way forward. Once you've got that right, do you foresee any issues with that transmitting? Because things like the charging network being available will be something that consumers will think about. Are there any issues around that transmitting through?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're getting at is there's not just price, you also need to make sure the experience or the product is comparable. And right now we don't have the charging infrastructure that means all EVs are as convenient to own. So it's, you need the price to be better or the same, and you need the experience to be better or the same. And if the experience is much better, the price doesn't have to be much better. So those two things are interlinked, and we absolutely have to invest in a whole lot of the infrastructure around EVs to scale that. Yeah.
Anyone else want to add to that?
I think just drive an EV. Once people have driven one, they won't go back if they're in the option of that. And thinking back on the plant-based food, if you speak to Pat from Impossible Foods, he says their burger gets better every day, which is kind of hard to do. A cow's optimized itself for a long time.
Yeah.
So you can see the price points on plant-based foods are actually the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, where there's lots of different ways you can produce it, just plant-based, fermented food, cultivated, cultured food. Then between now and 2030, all those get cheaper, healthier, better, and it's about taste, affordability, accessibility, fashion, and things like that. People will take a choice, and it was a sort of, if I go back to sort of IKEA time when I was in IKEA, LEDs were still more expensive. But at a certain point in time, people got it. They said, okay, it's going to last me 20 years and save me energy. I'm prepared to pay more for it now. We tried the same thing. It was interesting with rechargeable batteries. And we had rechargeable batteries. You could recharge them 500 times. It was when they got to 3 times as much as conventional battery, people started buying them. They wanted 497 times for free. So people aren't necessarily hyper-rational. We're not all economists like Eric here. So it's got to feel right. I think we've got to get it to the feel right.
Mm-hmm.
Right, the lady there, if we can get the microphone. Yes, yeah, gotcha. Okay.
Thank you, Steve. I'd like just to ask you about both sustainability and also the sort of future of Britain in terms of industrial strategy. You look at something like wind, offshore wind's been a tremendous success, but very little of the offshore wind engineering is produced here. And how we could think about that, perhaps the next technology leap, and how we should be thinking about that as a country.
Yeah, I think there's a longer discussion to that. I think it's a really important question. And if you look, if you could say digitization and sustainability are the 2 big megatrends that reshape everything together. So it is our food systems, it's the built environment, it's energy systems. All of these, we're just in the beginning of this incredible transformation. So there's a lot of businesses and technologies that haven't been invented or developed or scaled yet. So you do need this connectivity through. We need sort of our education system is still the anchor and the base for this, I think, absolutely. And the innovation ecosystem that sits on top of that. Silicon Valley is still, people say it's peaked and things like that. Silicon Valley still has an incredibly rich innovation ecosystem. And there's also sort of a culture of being prepared to try things, encouraging and promoting entrepreneurship in a big way. So I think we need to look at that whole approach. But one thing we've seen is policy counts, long-term policy counts, because then businesses know they can invest at scale. So if you know actually the future's about industries X, Y, and Z, and it really is, and there's long-term policy signals, then you invest in scale, and that helps develop and build out the ecosystem, develop domestic talent and bring in international talent.
Okay, and there's a gentleman there, and there was a hand up. their white shirt. If we can get a microphone. Can we get a microphone over here? Oh, you've got one? Oh, sorry, that was me.
So sometimes politics in the UK is seen as a generation conflict, the older generation against the younger. But business in the past has harnessed the pester power of children in supermarkets, for example. Is there a way to harness the pester power of the younger generation to influence their parents and their grandparents?
Well,
Eric, why don't you?
sure. One of the things in writing the book with Corrine that I found very revealing was I looked into Extinction Rebellion in a lot closer detail. And one of the things I really like about Extinction Rebellion is they're realists. In fact, they're a very small part of the whole climate movement, if you will, that are absolutely pragmatic. And their pragmatism is well worth listening on YouTube. There's a talk that Roger Hallam, one of the co-founders, gives about how to solve climate change in 6 months. And I find it both profoundly interesting and also deeply frustrating. One thing you'll notice that they avoid doing, which is the entire focus of what we do, which is talk about policy. And I think they do that for a good strategic reason. But what they do is they do empower you. And they empower you by looking at the history of civil disobedience and societal change, drawing on work from Erica Chenoweth at Harvard, which is fascinating, where she studied, I think, hundreds of periods in human history where there has been huge social change. And you're kind of alluding to it, that young people have an opportunity here to create social change. And what's very empowering, so we always say now to people when they come to us and say, what should we do as individuals? I mean, if you listen to our diagnosis, this is not about individual action. This is actually about harnessing capital expenditure and investment on a vast scale. So what can the individual do? The individual can be an activist. So what's really interesting in Erica Chenoweth's work is that huge social change has typically been caused by less than 3% of the population saying enough is enough. And Extinction Rebellion are right. If you get 3.5% of the population of this country onto the streets, or I think, this I'm not advocating, but I think they say if you get 3,000 students arrested, that is the limit of our tolerance. In other words, they literally say, if that happens, you will have a seat at the table. And part of the reason we wrote the book is I think there's a pretty good chance they're going to get a seat at the table, but I want them to have a manifesto. I actually want to know, what are we going to do if we have to sit down and say, because the younger generation just says enough is enough, we're going to start, lining the motorways with our bodies. What are we actually going? What's the settlement going to be?
Can I just pick up just
very briefly?
Yeah, I think the Greta effect. I've had lots of senior executives say it's really, our hands are tied, we're not very powerful, and you're a C-suite executive in a major company, and you've seen a then 16-year-old schoolgirl take on the world. So who's got the power in this situation? So we've seen pester power. So the school climate strikes, the kids on the street, they have been hugely powerful and influential within this, and I'm sure we've not seen even the start, even half of that yet.
Yeah, and I would add, we both work extensively with kind of C-suite leaders, and I've been struck how many of them cite their children and young employees as their motivator or their wake-up call on the climate crisis, kind of teenage children. So it is happening at some level.
We've only got a few seconds left on this session. Just the Greta effect, I'm interested in it. But do you think that it motivates industry or frightens industry because they think, we've got a job to do, we've still got to make money, we've still got shareholders, we've got to do, there is a structure we've got, and the Greta effect is to say, to it all.
Yeah.
Well, the point is that there's two dimensions to this, right? So what I would say is that the job of Extinction Rebellion is not to be popular. I mean, again, what's very interesting, if you look at the history of civil disobedience, Martin Luther King, I think, was the least popular man in America, and now there's a day devoted to his celebration. So the game here is not popularity. Having said that, that's not my job. I also think, as a policy community, as an economics community, we are failing our broader society because we've been advocating simplistic and incorrect policies. We've been failing to learn from the success stories, and the current narrative is dysfunctional, both economically and politically.
Okay, we must leave it there. We're out of time because, to quote Martin Luther King, the arc of history bends towards tea time. We'll be back shortly.